What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what the news is saying about Cathie Wood that's very important, what she just did that involves Tesla, and also what's going on with some other important factors affecting the markets. But before I break anything down all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000 into the account, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks. This offer ends in just a few weeks. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with Tesla. Looking at Tesla, this thing attempted to break out of this downward channel it was stuck in. But the thing about Tesla is we came right back down into the channel, and during the after hours, it's trying to break again. So it's showing some life right now, but the problem with Tesla is the fact that it got this failed breakout attempt. So it's not entirely strong. It's not extremely weak to the point where this thing is just like crashing. It's not really doing that as it's trying to base right here, but at the same time, it's struggling to break out. So it's kind of stuck within a range. And we're going to be watching to see how Tesla performs going into tomorrow. So I first want to now talk about some other economic data and some things about Cathie Wood before I break down the charts in more details. And that's why it's very important to pay attention to how these other factors affect the markets, because these factors affected Tesla too. Uh, Going into tomorrow, I have a reminder for everyone. 1 hour before the market opens, we have the non-farm payrolls, the unemployment numbers, the labor force participation rates, and all this important governmental data that's coming out. But the most important piece of data for tomorrow in the morning, at least, 1 hour before market open, is going to be the unemployment rate. We want this to be around 3.8 to 3.9%. The last time this came out, it was 3.7%. So let's hope we see a slight increase, because this is what the Fed is after to bring down inflation. And not just that, it's also because the Fed is kind of like aiming for a reset, at least in my opinion. So we're going to be looking to see how the labor market's affected by this. We're going to be watching to see if this meets the consensus in the forecast. We're expecting a slight increase. And if it's too low or too high, this could also lead to more nuances in the market. So watch that very carefully. We'll see what the unemployment numbers look like. Besides that, after all this data comes out, I'll be talking about this data, by the way, tomorrow morning in my pre-market video. But besides that, during the intraday basis, we have more data coming out. 30 minutes after market open, we have the next set of data that's going to be coming out. We have the ISM services prices, employment, and etc. data coming out. The new orders will be the most important part, because this will give us a good forecast of how the economy is looking. And besides that, everything else is just kind of minor, so nothing too crazy. So we'll look for some more volatility 30 minutes after market open at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Besides that, we just have Barkin from the Fed giving a speech at 1:30. So as a reminder, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, an hour before market open, we have the unemployment numbers. And then at 10 o'clock a.m., we have the services data, especially the new orders, which will give us a gauge about some more future projections on inflation, the strength of the economy, and things like that. So watch for volatility at those times, but it's nothing too insane. I mean, this is not like equivalence to like a CPI report. This data is kind of minor for the most part. So I'm not saying it's going to be a massive, massive catalyst for the market, but it could cause some volatility. Besides that, we have the fear and greed index. This was at extreme greed. Now it's just at greed. So it's not that insane right now, but there are some things that are like important to look at when it comes to other indicators. So market momentum is kind of decreasing just a little bit. This is because the market's becoming less greedy. Same thing with many of the other indicators. But there are two things which are very important. The put and call options are becoming less in favor of basically the calls and more in favor of puts, as the market's becoming more short, and we're starting to see greed kind of like swaying away from the markets. This is generally what happens when the market starts slowing down, and this could be indicative of more selling to come in the future. Market volatility. So the VIX is starting to test the 50-day moving average. This is very important. We haven't broken this quite yet, so we'll be watching to see if we could get that break. If it breaks this could lead to a surge in volatility and more downside, or this would be because of downside in the markets, if anything, because remember, the market's dictating implied volatility. So we'll be watching this as well to see if the VIX gets a breakout. That's going to be something on my radar. For Cathie Wood, some big news came out. This was actually announced today, technically, but this came out for yesterday, that Cathie Wood ended up buying about 105,000 Tesla shares for the ARK ETF. It's ARK Invest is what actually purchased it, but sometimes, we have ARKK and other ETFs that are associated with it. But the important thing about this is that with that being said, 105,000 Tesla shares were bought. Cathie Wood's ARK Investment Management bought them. And that's actually about $25 million that was spent in the process of doing so. So that's a pretty big investment that was made. She also announced that they sold about $25.29 million worth of Coinbase stock, and they actually bought 25 million plus worth of Tesla. So that's very interesting to be watching for. This is making all the headlines right now. Cathie Wood buys Tesla shares. Once again, buying into Tesla, looking at the robo-taxi potential and things like that is very awesome. She has a very, very bullish stance on Tesla for the long term. I have the same view of it. But some people may criticize her for kind of like overestimating her price targets. Whether or not that's true, time will tell. But if anything, like I said before, I still agree with her that Tesla has so much potential upside, especially thanks to AI and the robo-taxi developments. So I agree with the large majority of her points. I do agree with the upside coming to Tesla, and I think that she made a good move here. But the thing I want to warn you guys about, and this is not financial advice, but with the recession that's potentially coming, there's no guarantee that Tesla's at a bottom quite yet right now. If there's more downside in the future, like my strategy is basically to just buy in and just slowly dollar cost average because you never know where the true bottom is going to be. And we already have a bunch of shares. We're going to make money either way. If it goes up, we make money. If it drops more, we just buy more. Not financial advice, but that's like kind of like my strategy. And I don't like go all in at once. I just like to slowly dollar cost average buy in good snippets, and that can be very profitable. That's similar to what Cathie Wood is doing right now. Not financial advice once again. So I'm saying this because when you look at the weights of ARK, this is from ARK Invest, basically, by the way. Coinbase makes up 10% of their weight. They have a massive position in Coinbase. Also, for Tesla, they have the second largest position at a 7.96% weight. They have massive, massive amounts of money in Tesla right now, also in Coinbase. Those are their top two holdings. And this is, once again, very, very interesting stuff. They're both very bullish on those two stocks. Now, what else is worth noting when it comes to SPY? I just want to call out that for tomorrow, it's going to be Friday. We have a 1.02 puts to call ratio. We have about just under about 550,000 calls expiring tomorrow and 550,000 puts expiring, a 1.02 puts to call ratio with 468 being max pain. We'll be watching this very, very carefully to see how SPY does. But because the puts and calls are basically balanced, the market makers don't have to like favor one side over the other to massive extents to win. Could they still do it? It's always a possibility, but they don't have to do it. They don't. It doesn't really give them a massive advantage because either, excuse me, either way, the overall options are just kind of balanced. That means that if we close to max pain, that would be very advantageous for them. There's a good chance we might see something like that, so watch that very carefully. As far as Tesla goes, 102.4 million in volume, a little bit below average, not really making crazy moves. We saw the short volume drop a little bit less shorting than usual. On top of this, Oppenheimer gave Tesla a performance rating, saying it's going to perform equally with the markets. Price price ratio is dropping because Tesla's a little bit weak right now, just a little bit weak. And then on top of this, Fridays tend to be green only about 49% of the time. So it's kind of like 50-50. Besides that, watch for volatility at 2 p.m. This hasn't really changed much. We are seeing a little shift here. We tend to see more volatility in Tesla during the last couple of hours. So around 2 and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, watch for volatility. That is it when it comes to the overall metrics. Very strong financial estimates for the long term. Now, let's finally break down the charts. What on earth is going on with Tesla? So Tesla has this channel. It was trying to break out and it ended up failing. It failed to get a massive, massive breakouts today. You can see we were in this downward channel for quite some time. We tried to break out, we failed once we hit this 242 resistance. So this establishes a range for Tesla. Tesla's getting bought up between 237 about 234. I'm going to call out a big range because of the fact that when you look at the daily, we have this 200 EMA to test. We look bearish on the daily candlestick, so I think Tesla might drop a little bit, but there are buyers trying to defend it. This is why when you look at the 4-hour time frame, the MACD is starting to turn just a little bit because we're seeing buyers trying to defend Tesla. This doesn't mean they're going to shoot it up to like $300 overnight, but it is telling us that it's not dropping as hard as it used to be. We're not dropping 4%, we're only down 0.22%. That's your example. So what do I see for Tesla? It might actually drop a little bit and kind of like kiss 234 and try to like bounce off of that a little bit. It might touch that, try to bounce, just go back and forth around that range. So watch the support at the 200 EMA on the daily time frame. So I think 234 could be tested. We might actually come down just a little bit, touch that, come back up and just trade very sideways tomorrow within our range. I think we're going to be stuck between the very low 240s and around 234 as major supports. Not to mention, we're going to spend most time within this range right here. So I think it's going to be stuck. Let me kind of rephrase that. We're going to be stuck between 237 and 242 tomorrow, going back and forth and back and forth. There might be a moment when we open, especially after the data comes out, where we kind of touch 234 and then we kind of bounce off of it and just trade sideways. There's going to be a good chance of that potentially happening. So I think it might just trade sideways tomorrow, not really do anything too crazy. Today was a very sideways day too. It didn't really do much. We might continue into tomorrow. But if you want to be really bearish, you want to see this thing close below 234. If that happens, we will turn very bearish. For now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it might just kind of touch that and try to make its way back. For SPY, so far it's not looking too good because we broke below 468 on SPY, which is not a good sign, but it's trying to get back above it in the after hours. So we'll be watching this. It tried to break out today. It failed to get a breakout. It tried really hard, wanted to, and it failed because the bears were stronger. The bears still have the edge, so just be a little bit careful. Tomorrow it might try to backtest 468. We'll see if it could try to hold that or not. My gut tells me it's going to fail and come back down to 467. It may even break lower because the daily candlestick looks bearish on the daily. If we lose 467, we could go all the way down to 465, way down here. We could just maintain this channel for a little bit longer before we bounce. So we might get a very sideways day tomorrow. I would say that if we lose 467, excuse me, we might come down to 465. We might see a little drop that's coming as we look bearish on the daily. Then we might bounce intraday and kind of close very flat since it's a Friday and it works in the market maker's favor. So I think a drop and bounce is very probable for tomorrow. And I think we might close very flat in a very boring fashion. That's what I think is very probable for SPY. But just to be safe, watch resistance at 468. If that breaks, watch 469 and 470, followed by 471, and then we have 471.6 and 472. So very, very funny levels. I know it's like every dollar, guys. It's kind of funny as well for SPY. If we lose 467, I think that we could come all the way down to 465 for that imbalance fill. But like I said before, tomorrow we might see a little drop before we see some buyers try to defend it. Nonetheless, though, SPY does look a little bit weak on the daily, so there's no sign of it truly getting a massive bounce just yet. But we might just see lots of a very flat close as well. As far as the QQQ goes, we might see something very similar. It looks kind of weak on the daily, but we're approaching basically 395 right now. I think that's going to be a very important support. At 395, if we end up hitting that level, we're going to be watching to see if buyers defend it right over there. If we end up hitting 395 and bouncing, we're going to be watching to see how well it holds. On top of this, at this 395 level, we're kind of stuck right now at this support. So I'm going to be watching to see how it reacts to this. We're rejecting off this white trend line right here. Notice how it was kind of rejecting. It's been trying to break out. It tried to break out and just rejected. So there's a good chance it might struggle to break above this. Could pop again tomorrow to like 397 and come back down. We might struggle to break at this white trend line, so watch that carefully. If we do trend downwards, we could test 395 again tomorrow, then bounce and just trade kind of sideways. I find that very probable for tomorrow, just like SPY, a little drop and then bounce. So watch that very carefully on the triple Q. If we lose 395, our next target is going to be 394, and then we have 392.5 and 390 below that. But I think it's going to at least test 395 and then try to bounce and trade sideways. For resistance, we have 397 at this imbalance, 397.5. We have 398, 399.64, and we have 400 flats as resistance. Watch those levels very carefully. For Nvda is basically on in this channel now. What's interesting is we had a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. It tried to break out. We got a nice breakout to 485, which is a pretty decent move, but then we rejected as the market showed some weakness. Now we have this trend line. It's going to be our support. This is going to be our resistance. I wouldn't be surprised if Nvidia kind of trades sideways like this for the majority of the day. Watch 482 as resistance. 480, then 482, and then 485 above that. For support, watch 479. If we lose that, watch 477, which is where our white trend line happens to be, followed by 475. Watch those levels very carefully. We'll see how it ends up going. It might just continue to maintain this range as time goes on, so we'll be watching this very, very carefully. This is what Nvidia may be doing as we make an attempt to get up to this imbalance. But for now, we'll be watching to see which way it breaks, if we do break in either direction. But I think the most probable move is it's going to just maintain this range. So I think that's what's going to most likely do. For Aapl, I just want to call out Aapl right now. Aapl, in my opinion, is looking kind of weak. We have resistance around 182. And if we break that, there's 183 Well, there's 183, then 183.5, then 184.25 is resistance. For support, watch 181 and then 180. Right now, we're kind of stuck between 181 and around 183. We might just stay in this range, just get tighter and tighter, not really do much. If it manages to break 183.5, then I'm going to turn a little bullish, but I don't see that happening. I think Apple's looking kind of weak. The volume is not the best. It's kind of stuck right now, so it might just remain in this range, not really doing much. Now I'm going to be kind of quick, guys. If you if you didn't think I was quick, I'm going to be even quicker. This is going to be fast because I want to end this video very quickly and just go over many of these tickers. Rivian looks kind of bearish right now. I think it's going to test 18.2 very soon, so watch that imbalance. 18 is likely coming for Rivian. It looks bearish, if anything. The IWM has not fully filled this gap. It's come very close to doing so, but we haven't fully done it yet. I think it's going to test the 192s and attempt to bounce around there. It might hit 192, bounce a little bit. If it loses that, it could get all the way down to 190. So I see a little bit more downside coming before it attempts to hold up. So watch that very carefully on the Russell 2000. For Microsoft, it looks bearish to me, a little bit bearish. I think it might come down to 364 to 365 and test our daily 50 EMA before it tries to bounce, but I see a little bit more downside coming for it. For AMD, thanks to Nvda, this thing could actually test 138, try to fill this gap and then try to reject, but it has to break 136.5 first. Now, it might not hold too well since we have a bearish crossover on the PPO, and this is because of the fact that we're not officially super bullish because we didn't close above 136.5 yet. So watch and see if this thing can test 138 then reject. It hasn't broken the 20 EMA yet, so I'm not officially too bullish. For Netflix, this is kind of flat right now. Watch it test 476 again. If this breaks, we're going to be looking for a test of 480, around this 480 to 483 area. It's on a downtrend. Technically, it's not officially bullish. It might push a little bit and form a flag and make its way back down later on, so watch that carefully. For the VIX, it looks bullish on the dailies, trying to break out, but it's testing the 50 EMA and also the 50 moving average right now. It's testing each of those. So we're going to be watching to see if it could break out. This is going to be on my radar. It does look bullish, but we have to wait and see just to be safe. The dollar looks bullish overall. It is kind of struggling to break around 102.5, but I think it's going to test 103 soon at the 50 EMA. For Coinbase, if anything, I would say that Coinbase is not looking the strongest. We have a potential bearish crossover on the PPO. It might push up towards 160 and reject and come down to 144. We're going to be looking for a rejection, and I think it's going to retest 144 soon. Google came down a bit, looks kind of bearish. I think 136.6 is going to be tested. We'll see if it bounces here or not, but I think the 50 EMA is going to be tested, so it looks kind of bearish. For Amazon, we're also looking kind of bearish. Again, it actually broke below the 50 EMA, which is a big break. I think 142.8 is going to be tested. I think there's more downside coming to Amazon before it tries to base around 142. For Meta, it's looking decent. I told you yesterday that we can't turn officially bearish on Meta unless we break 344, adds the 20 EMA. We haven't broken this yet, so watch that as key support. It also has resistance at 348.6 and 350. I think 348 to 350 is going to be tested for a little push up, then a rejection, and a move back down towards 344. If we lose 344, we're going to be looking for a move back down to 340. If we close below the 50, not the 50, the 20 EMA, then we could turn bearish if we lose this green EMA right here. So that being said, guys, I think that Meta is going to remain range bound, but watch and see if it loses 344 soon. If it loses that, it's going to turn bearish. So we're going to be watching these levels very carefully. As far as Tesla goes, I expect it to remain range bound for some time. It could actually drop a little bit, kind of like test 234 and then hopefully try to bounce off that and try to hold up. His buyers are defending it. But just know, as a reminder, if we lose 234 and we close below that, we're going to turn even more bearish. So just be very careful on Tesla. Watch the daily 200 EMA very carefully. And with that being said, thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day, guys. Enjoy the evening, and I'll see you guys very soon. Tesla to the moon because the long term is very bright, and peace out.